So this is the beginning and end of the video. You'll be able to watch the rest of it to show a more detailed instruction on how this goes together. And what this is the Essential Garden Mission Creek 10x12 Hard Top Gazebo with netting. And this is what it is. It's got a semi-transparent pell roof type of, it's that corrugated material, really good stuff. You can see that it's a shade building, so that it will act as a shade in particularly strong sunlight, unlike the greenhouse type stuff that's made out of the same material. The advantage of one of these things, and they cost about $1,000, is that a lot of the angle cutting's been done at the factory for these things. So your setup and assembly time is going to be roughly, one short work day for two people is what we're running into. In fact, if you start in the morning, go to the store, pick this up, unpack it, clean everything up, get everything ready, you should be able to have a barbecue in it the very same afternoon. So as a reasonably well equipped backyard, what this does is this adds more shade space, more usable space. It is made to handle the snow load. The specifications are going to be in the kit, and I'm not sure if it's in here, but basically, it shows how it's an aluminum frame. There is some steel involved. There's some parts of the video I made before finding this brochure, which was in with the netting, and so that's what's going to tell you a lot about what's going on. But the building's built to last. I don't know if it's a 20 or 30 year thing, but it's a good little building as far as yard structures go. Part of the latest generation in kit yard buildings, made of metal, relatively complex construction. And you'll be able to watch the rest of the video how we went through the assembly process and the learning process. This was the first one that I had done. We had to do it in multiple trips because some of the parts that came in a box were wrong, and we had to reobtain parts from the manufacturer, which took a little bit of time. So you'll see evidence of a time delay in the different stages of the video. So on to the rest of the video, which will start with the unpacking procedure. This is the start of the Essential Garden 10x12 garden gazebo structure assembly. This one has a stiffened roof that's made of a semi-transparent polycarbonate, really good stuff, very durable, and then a mesh side arrangement. However, it's not overly difficult to build this into a solid side arrangement with some modifications. Pricing on these is usually around $600, but it can be a little higher, a little lower, depending on your area. It is rated as a mild weather type of thing. There is no snow load rating on this. The instructions have said that it is a not something with a snow rating. It should be taken down for winter. In the real world, nobody's going to take it down for the winter because of storage issues, but it is possible to kind of unbolt the sub-assemblies on these and store them or transport them. And so it's this Mission Creek 10x12 model will get going on the assembly. Expect your uncrating, unboxing, unpacking to, one, require that full 10x12 space as a working space, and it's going to take about an hour just to get everything unpacked, ready to go. All of the parts, you'll notice, though, are conveniently lettered so that you can get through the instructions fairly easily with those. And confirming that when you place these bolts with the nuts, the flange faces up, and I may redo this because we're checking that, because the long side's going to be facing up too, the way that goes. The part with the little tab is up. The part with those little hangers, which will eventually be for the shaded side, is down. And of course you'll need to use pliers or a wrench or something to hold the other end of those. Those are lock nuts. Once they're tightened in, it's kind of a one-way street. You could undo them, but you really don't want to. And so we'll get a demonstration on how that goes with the impact. Simply hit that from both ends. And there you'll see that it tweaks everything down tight as you build through there. He's leaving the first one a little bit loose as he does a set, and we'll go back and retighten them. So with a little bit of wrestling, we've got these cross pieces on. Now, this part was done earlier, and one of the things you'll notice is that there's a little bit of forgiveness in the way these downleggers go to make up for any lack of level in the rest of the system. So you may be loosening and tightening these little double nut things here in order to level out your legs. Now, with the soft-sided building, if you look at how that angling goes, this one they're going to loosen up and redo a little bit. If you're on a slightly uneven surface, that's okay. That's part of what compensates for it. If you're doing a hard side version of this, let's say you're attaching hard material to this to do a little bit more solid on the walls, let's say converting this to a partial greenhouse, then these measurements become a little bit more critical, but you'll still have, you know, room. You have fudge factor on the width of this to work with it. So converting this to a firmer building is not overly difficult. And remember, the cost isn't far off of, you know, a good quality tent. These are your hangers for the soft sides, and we're going to get more parts up on this thing right now. Okay, just to clarify, everybody can make a few mistakes. On this one, we put that little H-tab in the middle on here because there's two of them, because of the way this works with the cross braces on the top supports. And we got to make sure we didn't do those upside down or wrong, so we're kind of double and triple checking that. This doesn't go in the middle here, even though it may look like that in the instructions. So I've got to pull this one off, and one goes on each end right here. And you'll notice there's a little clearance space for the bar, because this way this thing's engineered, it gives you a little roof overhang. And these have little slots, so there's a little fudge factor adjustment in that. Just in case you're on slightly uneven ground, you can loosen these and retighten them in order to kind of get things to fit tightly and firmly. And I'm surprised how stiff and secure this thing actually feels, considering it's lightweight. Two people can move this thing relatively easily. You got to be tall enough people that you lift up on the bar, but it's working out pretty well. What happens is this part here, the upper part, had to be assembled mostly on the ground with the cross pieces, one guy on a ladder, another guy down below, getting these screws in here. But with the diagonal, now these 6 go in, okay, and with the diagonal, with the kind of squared off ones in, the diagonals get put on with this thing already up. And so we've got a guy working on that stuff right there.
Get those little brackets together.
Yeah, that's because these things have to be done basically from the top. These little brackets go on first. As you can see over here, those go on first, and then they get screwed down from the top. So that's this, and it's this part where you got to have a ladder, and you got to kind of have two people, somebody handing the parts up and working there. I'll hang on to that while you get the rest of the way up the ladder. You got to get this over here, and then once this is placed in, again, there's a little fudge factor on here as far as the depth of these go when we slide the panels in place. But we've got to get all of these pieces in. And once these are in, it really reinforces the structure. But it's still a relatively lightweight structure. So later in the game, if you are in a situation with high winds, you will have to find some way of bolting the structure down or holding it to the ground. So as we get these pieces, he gets that piece in, I'm going to prep the top cap. The top cap will go in, and then we start putting the panels on. Okay, so what gets important here is these little cross brace pieces, which are going to help pull the weight of the panels. The panels have a metal rim to give them stiffness, and in a way these pieces, you know, you see this little fudge factor with positioning, but one of the confusing aspects, and you'll have to look at the instruction sheet, you'll see there's an angle cut. Well, what the angle cut corresponds to is where on the angle cut this all goes. And this is where buying these buildings in kits really helps over doing the lumber or the metalwork yourself, in that all those tricky angles have been figured out at the factory and by the original engineers of the building. And that's what's going to save you a lot of time as opposed to building something like this from scratch. So these overlap, and the trick is you start with the first pair, you work your way around. When you get to the end of that, you're going to have a single bolt you put in not tight. You don't really crank those tight until you're at a double. And then, then use the impact driver. Don't go killer tight, but go nice and firm as you work your way around the building. And then, of course, the next stage will be putting that in. One thing we did before putting this up is we put that center cap on that just kind of covers the bolt heads at the top. Nearly all the gazebos are going to have that sort of a center cap design. One of the things, if you're in a bug kind of area with a lot of insects, you won't want to spray some bug killer in there. That ends up being wasp and hornet heaven in those little spaces. But apart from that, we're going to be closing all this, closing this in. And again, all this added material starts giving a lot more structural integrity to this roof, and it's what makes it a little bit more snow load capable. But remember, we're not adding enough weight to this building to make it not blow in a hurricane, so you will need to bolt this building down. So we'll finish this up and we'll show the panels going up, and it's another one of those situations where you may enter some frustration in making sure you get the right panels in the right places as you work your way around. Okay, so in sliding these pieces in, this is where it gets frustrating. Now, if these pieces had been sitting out or in storage for any period of time, we had some bugs crawl up into this stuff and die. It's one of the things that happens with this type of material. The other thing is, there's a lip that's going to determine which side these are on. Again, look at the instructions or try to do it make sense. Because it kind of rain gutters right at this transition point. And one of the things we found is this stuff wasn't fitting because you got to kind of like smack them in. And then what holds these from sliding back downward are these little corner pieces. So you get a flat tab on these two transitions, and then there's a corner tab. It's a little tricky because it can kind of want to try to fall down before you get everything up. So what happens in the instructions, they say to get the two long sides in before you do the other sides. The other thing is, if things are a little bit out of square, this is where you maybe need to loosen up a couple other bolts and retighten them down. Over here, you can't loosen these once those cap pieces are in, but it's where we're loosening up some of these things in order to get these in, and then we're going to tighten them back in once it's in. And another two-man job, he was able to get a couple of these pieces in, but we're just smack these from underneath to hold. And if there's any variation, okay, there is a little fudge factor in the way those corner brackets go. But what it is the upper one, it has a little lip that goes under. The lower one, the upper one has a lip that goes over, the under one goes under, so that it's kind of shingled. And then we're trying to line these up in these grooves, and that's your other margin of error, which gets real tricky on the corners. And I'm going to have to turn off the camera and help him on this. So with the upper roof panels on, we tighten these things back down, and turn out if these things aren't wanting to go, and panels aren't wanting to go in place, you got to loosen these back up and not impact them tight until you're really done getting the panels in. And these little buggers are tricky. You flip them out. I'll show you how these people are doing them here. Well, it's tricky, but they do go on. There is no additional hardware to put those in. And it's basically one for each grommet on the screen sides of this. And so that's how that goes. And of course you'll have zipper sides on all, you have tie down points, Velcro wraps for everything. And if you do want to convert this over to a hard side building, it's not overly difficult to make a lot of attachments on these columns. Although I might suggest reinforcing them a little bit, but it wouldn't be all that difficult to make this into a hard side building using the Palram type material, which is very similar to what's on the roof here, but not tinted. Or you could get a hold of the tinted material, build another framework, and turn this into a kind of a shade room. As you can see, we're done, and the end is very much like the beginning, right? So we put these in, it's all set and done. I'm going to film the introduction at the same time. There's a neat little hanger spot for your light, but obviously even in the rain, this gives you some good usable space. In hot sunlight, it gives you shade. But one of the things I was a little concerned about was the shallowness of some of the gutters on this. It's raining right now, obviously, and we're not getting any drips in here. The way this is engineered, it's not really going to deteriorate over time. So you're going to be just fine for several years as you go with this thing. And so there it is. And you're looking at about, a short work day to get everything put together. If a crew gets really experienced with this particular type of building, I would say 2 guys, 4 hours, but that's only if they're experienced with this exact same building. Normal people, I think it's going to be around 6 hours total. You've got a full hour of unpacking, just unpacking the packages on this.